rain had started as a drizzle during the funeral service, soft as a whisper against the umbrella tsupoas that bloomed like black flowers across the cemetery. By the time we lowered Eleanor's coffin into the earth, the drizzle had turned into a steady, cold rain that soaked through the wool of my suit. It felt almost symbolic, heaven crying for a woman too pure for this cruel world. She had been my world, my wife, my partner, my anchor. 40 years together, building everything from nothing. Our home, our businesses, our family. And now, as I stood beside her grave at Willow Creek Cemetery, I felt as if half of me had been buried with her. My son, Edward, stood beside me, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. He was dressed impeccably as always, tailored black suit, polished shoes, that familiar cologne Eleanor had once bought him when he graduated from Harvard. I remembered that day vividly, the way she had cried, telling me, "He'll make us proud one day." I wanted to believe she was right, but as the priest's final words drifted into the gray air and people began to disperse, something about Edward's eyes made me uneasy. They were cold. Not the eyes of a grieving son, but of a man already thinking of his next move. When the last of the guests had left, I lingered by Eleanor's grave, unable to leave. My trembling hand rested on the wet headstone. Goodbye, my love. The world felt unbearably empty. By the time Edward and I returned to the house, it was nearing dusk. The mansion sat at the edge of Lincoln Park, its stone facade glistening under the rain. Inside, the silence was oppressive. Every corner whispered her presence, the scent of her perfume, the faint traces of her laughter still echoing through the halls. I hung my soaked coat and turned to my son. "Edward," I said softly, let's not talk about anything tonight. Let's just rest. We can deal with the legal matters tomorrow." He didn't answer. Instead, he strode toward the living room where Mr. Foster, our family lawyer, was already waiting. Papers were spread neatly across the coffee table. The will. Eleanor's last words to the world. Something in my stomach twisted. "Dad," Edward said, his tone sharp, "let's get this over with." Mr. Foster's face was drawn and pale. He had been Eleanor's confidant for years. A man of integrity, someone I trusted deeply. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses and began to read. "I, Eleanor Margaret Whitmore, being of sound mind and heart, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." Her voice came alive in my memory as he read her words. I could almost hear her steady tone, calm and deliberate, the way she always spoke when discussing serious matters. My eyes stung with tears as the list of her assets was read. Properties, investments, accounts, art collections, everything we had built together. Then came the line that would change everything. "I hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate to my beloved son, Edward Whitmore." The world seemed to stop. My breath caught in my throat. The words echoed inside my skull like a cruel joke. I turned slowly to Edward, hoping, praying it was some kind of misunderstanding. But his lips had already curved into a smile. Not of relief, not of love, but of victory. Mr. Foster continued reading, but his voice grew faint, drowned by the roaring in my ears. I could barely comprehend the words. My mind clung to a single question. Why? Why would Eleanor do this? We had always made every decision together. Every account had both our names. Every business move was discussed late into the night over wine. And now, nothing? Not even the house? When the reading ended, silence fell over the room like a heavy fog. Mr. Foster gathered the papers carefully, his expression unreadable. Edward was the first to speak. "Well," he said, straightening his tie, "I suppose that's that." "Edward," I began, my voice trembling, "this must be some mistake. There's no way your mother would—" He cut me off with a bitter laugh. "Oh, there's no mistake, old man. Mom was the only one with money in this family, and now that she's gone, it's mine. All of it." "Edward, listen to yourself," I pleaded. "We just buried her. Have you lost all sense of decency?" He smirked, walking toward me, his shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor Eleanor had chosen 2 decades ago. "You talk about decency, Dad. You who lived off her wealth your whole life? Don't pretend to be some saint. You never worked a single day." Mom ran everything while you sat in that study of yours reading old history books. His words struck me like physical blows. I felt my heart pounding painfully against my ribs. That's not true. Butchery, I whispered. Everything we did together. She wanted me to. To what? Be her pet? He spat. Her little companion while she handled the real world? Wake up, Dad. You were nothing but decoration. Mr. Foster shifted uncomfortably. Edward, perhaps this isn't the best time. Oh, it's the perfect time, Edward snapped. Let's be clear about something. This house, the businesses, the money, they're mine now, and you— He jabbed a finger toward me, eyes glinting with cruel delight. You're nothing, less than nothing. The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My legs felt weak, and I reached for the armrest of a chair to steady myself. Tears blurred my vision. This was my son, the little boy who once clung to my neck during thunderstorms, who cried when he scraped his knees, who used to say, Dad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. Where had that boy gone? Edward, I said hoarsely, please. I know you're angry, confused. Confused, he barked a laugh. No, Dad, I've never been clearer in my life. You've had a free ride for 40 years. It's over. You have 24 hours to get out of my house. The way he said my house made my skin crawl. Mr. Foster tried again, his voice calm but firm. Edward, there's something important we should discuss before any decisions are made. I'm not sure you've read the entire will. Edward turned sharply, suspicion flickering in his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? Mr. Foster hesitated. For a fraction of a second, I saw something pass between him and me, a shared understanding. Eleanor had told him something Edward didn't know. The lawyer's lips curved slightly. Nothing urgent, he said carefully. Let's just say your mother was very thorough in her planning. You'll understand soon enough. Edward's eyes narrowed. Don't play games with me, counselor. I wouldn't dare, Mr. Foster replied smoothly, but I suggest you be patient. There's more than meets the eye. For the first time that night, I saw doubt flicker across my son's face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He turned to me, rage reigniting. You're leaving now, he said. Pack your things. I don't want to see you under this roof another minute. He shoved me toward the door so violently I nearly lost my footing. My shoulder hit the frame, pain shooting down my arm. Mr. Foster rushed to steady me. Edward, that's enough, he snapped. Stay out of this, Edward roared. He's not your concern. I looked back at the living room one last time, the portraits on the wall, the piano Eleanor used to play on Sunday mornings, the scent of her roses still lingering from the garden. Memories swirled around me, each one sharper than the last, cutting deeper with every breath. Edward's voice followed me to the door. Don't you dare show up again. Not at another funeral, not at another event. You're dead to me. Just like Mom. The door slammed behind me with a sound that felt like the end of a life. Outside, the rain poured harder now, soaking through my suit until it clung to my skin. I stood in the driveway trembling, watching the mansion's windows glow faintly behind the curtains. For 40 years, that light had been my home. Now it was a stranger's house. I took a shaky step forward, then another. My old Buick sat parked by the curb, its windshield streaked with rain. As I reached it, I heard hurried footsteps splashing behind me. Mr. Robert, please wait. I turned to see Mr. Foster jogging toward me, his coat draped over his head. He looked pale but determined. You can't leave like this, he said breathlessly. There's something you need to know. It's urgent. I looked at him, exhausted. If this is about false hope, Richard, please don't. I've lost enough today. He shook his head. No, listen to me. Eleanor was smarter than Edward could ever imagine. She saw this coming. She planned for it. There are things in motion you don't yet understand. I frowned. Are you saying— Yes, he said quietly. She left something behind, something that will change everything, but you must come with me now before Edward figures it out. The conviction in his voice sent a shiver through me. I hesitated only a second before nodding. We got into the car, the wipers struggling against the downpour. As we pulled away from the house, I glanced through the rearview mirror. Edward stood at the window watching us leave. His face, once triumphant, now looked uncertain, worried, maybe even afraid. He didn't know what his mother had done. He didn't know she had been 3 steps ahead of him all along. And as the city lights of Chicago blurred through the rain, a faint spark of hope ignited in my heart, a fragile flame in the storm. The son who buried his conscience had no idea that the grave he dug might soon be his own. The rain followed us all the way downtown, drumming against the windshield like restless fingers. Mr. Foster's car cut through the wet streets of Chicago, headlights slicing through the mist. Neither of us spoke for the first 10 minutes. The city glowed faintly, reflections of neon signs on rain-slicked pavement, lonely figures hurrying under umbrellas. I sat in silence, staring out the window, watching droplets race down the glass. My heart was heavy with exhaustion and disbelief. Hours ago, I'd buried the woman who was the center of my world. Now I'd been thrown out of my own home by my only son. Eleanor saw this coming, Mr. Foster said finally, his voice low but firm. She knew Edward's nature better than anyone. She loved him, yes, but she also understood his weaknesses. I turned to him, my voice raw. Then why? Why would she leave everything to him? He gave a small, knowing smile. Because sometimes, Robert, the best way to reveal a man's soul is to give him everything he thinks he wants. I frowned. You're saying she tested him? In a way, yes, he said, eyes on the road. Your wife was a strategist, a visionary. You knew that better than anyone. She built empires, not just companies. But she also built contingencies. What Edward doesn't know is that there's another layer to her will, one that doesn't activate unless certain conditions are met. I leaned forward, heart pounding. Conditions? Yes, a hidden clause, locked away, legally sealed under confidentiality. Edward's arrogance made him blind. He only looked at the first page of the will, the one that named him sole beneficiary, but Eleanor made sure that agreed would be his undoing. I tried to process his words. My mind felt like it was struggling through fog. I don't understand. What did she do? Mr. Foster exhaled slowly. I'll explain everything once we reach my office. It's not safe to discuss in the car. We arrived at his building on Wacker Drive, an elegant, old-fashioned structure with marble columns and brass doors gleaming under the rain. The security guard nodded as we entered, eyes widening slightly when he saw my soaked funeral clothes. Inside, the warmth hit me immediately. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. We rode the elevator to the 12th floor in silence. My reflection in the mirrored wall looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, older than my years. When the elevator chimed open, Mr. Foster led me down a quiet hallway into his corner office. The space was just as I remembered it. Bookshelves lined with thick legal tomes, framed diplomas, and a large mahogany desk overlooking the city. A faint hum of the storm filled the background, muffled by the tall windows. Please sit, he said gently, motioning toward the chair across from his desk. I sank into the soft leather, my hands trembling slightly. Mr. Foster removed his wet jacket, hung it carefully, and retrieved a heavy leather briefcase from a cabinet. He placed it on the desk, clicked it open, and began to arrange several documents with meticulous precision. Robert, he said, meeting my gaze, what I'm about to show you was prepared by Eleanor herself 3 years ago. She asked me to keep it confidential, even from you, until after her passing. My chest tightened. She kept something from me? Not out of mistrust, he said quickly. Out of love. She wanted to protect you. She knew this would hurt you deeply, and she didn't want you burdened with the secret while she was alive. He slid the first document toward me, a notarized letter sealed in wax. My hands shook as I broke the seal and unfolded it. It was Eleanor's handwriting. I would have recognized it anywhere. My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, it means I am gone. And if Richard has followed my instructions, then you have already seen Edward's true face. Do not despair, my love. I never intended to leave you unprotected, but I had to be sure. For years, I have seen the hunger in our son's eyes, the need to control, to own, to dominate. It frightened me. He inherited my ambition, but not my compassion. That is why I crafted 2 wills. The one read publicly was for Edward. The other, the real one, is for you and for the future of what we built. If Edward fails this test of character, everything he has been given will revert by law to you, through a trust I have established under your name. But my love, I beg you, do not act in anger. Let the truth unfold naturally. Let him condemn himself through his own choices. When the time comes, Richard will show you what to do. With all the love I carry beyond death, Eleanor, my vision blurred as tears fell onto the page. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The storm outside rumbled faintly, as if echoing the turmoil in my chest. She knew, I whispered. She knew what he would become. Mr. Foster nodded solemnly. She did, and she made sure justice would find its way, even if it took time. I swallowed hard, still trembling. What is this trust she mentioned? He opened a second folder, revealing neatly typed legal documents stamped with notary seals and the emblem of the Whitmore Family Foundation. This, he said, tapping the papers, is a private trust Eleanor created in your name. It owns nearly 80% of the Whitmore corporate holdings. Officially, those shares were transferred to a neutral holding company years ago. What Edward received was only a symbolic inheritance, liquid assets, minor real estate, and the illusion of power. I blinked, stunned. You mean he doesn't actually own the company? Not truly, he replied. The control lies here with you. But the trust can only be activated if Edward violates the moral clause Eleanor wrote into her will. Moral clause? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded. If Edward, within 6 months of her death, displays cruelty, greed, or abuse toward you, the surviving spouse, the trust activates automatically. The company's ownership and full estate revert to your legal stewardship. It's not about money, Robert. It's about legacy, morality, and consequence. My mouth fell open slightly. She predicted this exact moment. She did, Mr. Foster said, and she was right on time. I leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed. But how do we prove it? A faint smile touched his lips. We don't have to. She already did. Eleanor installed a home security system last year, audio and video integrated with cloud backup. Every word Edward said tonight was recorded. The realization hit me like lightning. She set him up, I breathed. Not set up, Mr. Foster corrected. Prepared. She gave him a choice, to act with compassion or with cruelty. He chose cruelty, and now the clause has been triggered. I covered my face with my hands. The mix of grief, pride, and sorrow tore through me like waves. She outsmarted all of us, I said softly, even in death. Mr. Foster stood and walked to the window, gazing at the city below. Eleanor was many things, a wife, a mother, a leader, but above all, she was a strategist. And now her plan is unfolding exactly as she intended. He turned back to me. You have two choices, Robert. You can invoke the clause immediately and reclaim everything. Or, he hesitated, you can wait. Watch him destroy himself. Let him think he's won. I stared at the floor. The image of Edward's face, his sneer, his venom, flashed before me. If I take it all back now, he'll learn nothing, I said slowly. But if he watches it crumble, piece by piece, he'll understand what greed costs. Mr. Foster nodded approvingly. That's exactly what she hoped you'd say. The next morning, I woke up on the couch in Mr. Foster's guest room. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed and silent. The pale sunlight filtered through the blinds. My body ached from exhaustion, but my mind felt sharper than it had in years. For the first time since Eleanor's death, I felt purpose. I made coffee and stared out at the skyline. Somewhere across town, my son was probably celebrating his victory. But I knew that every celebration he threw, every dollar he spent, was built on sand. Eleanor's justice would come, not through revenge, but revelation. When Mr. Foster entered the room, Ty freshly nodded. I asked quietly, "What happens next?" He smiled faintly. "Next, we follow Eleanor's playbook. She left a sequence of letters, 5 in total, to be delivered to Edward at specific intervals. Each one reveals a piece of truth. Each one brings him closer to his own downfall." I raised an eyebrow. "She planned letters too?" "Oh yes," he said, Eleanor was nothing if not thorough. He handed me a sealed envelope labeled Phase 1, The Awakening. "What's inside?" I asked. "A gentle reminder," he said. "Nothing cruel, nothing vengeful, just enough to make him doubt everything he thinks he knows." I turned the envelope over in my hands, feeling the weight of it. For a long moment, I considered tearing it open. But I didn't. This wasn't my move. This was Eleanor's game, and she was still playing it through me. 2 days later, the phone rang in Mr. Foster's office. It was Edward. His voice trembled. "Mr. Foster," he snapped, trying to sound confident. "I received something strange in the mail, a letter from my mother. It's postmarked after her death. How is that possible?" Mr. Foster leaned back, calm as ever. "Ah, yes," he said smoothly. "Eleanor planned everything. She wanted to stay in touch, even from beyond the grave." "What the hell is this?" Edward demanded. "Just her way of reminding you," the lawyer said, "that actions have consequences." There was silence on the line, followed by a sharp exhale. "This is insane," Edward muttered. "She's dead." "Perhaps," Mr. Foster said, his tone almost amused, "but her influence isn't." The call ended abruptly. I watched Mr. Foster hang up, a small smile curving his lips. "It begins," he murmured. That night I sat by the window, watching the rain return, softer this time, almost comforting. I thought of Eleanor's words in her letter, "Let him condemn himself." I could almost hear her voice beside me, calm and sure, as if she were still guiding me. Edward believed he had buried his mother's body and with it, her power. But he was wrong, Eleanor. Whitmore's reach extended beyond the grave, through ink, law, and love. And as I stared into the wet streets of Chicago, I whispered softly to the night, "You were right, my love. He's about to learn what true inheritance means." The next few days blurred together in a haze of rain, sleepless nights, and unanswered questions. I hadn't gone back to the house. I couldn't bear to. Every memory there was soaked in betrayal. Eleanor's laughter in the kitchen, her music drifting through the hallways, her perfume lingering on the staircase. All of it poisoned now by the echo of Edward's voice screaming, "You're dead to me." I stayed in a small guest apartment Mr. Foster had arranged for me, a quiet, sunless place above a bookstore near the Chicago River. The air smelled faintly of paper and rain. At night, I would sit by the window with a cup of tea and stare at the city lights reflecting off the water. I felt both invisible and strangely alive, like a ghost rediscovering his own pulse. Every morning, Mr. Foster brought news. News of Edward, news of the empire he thought he owned. "He's already moving money," Richard said one morning, setting a folder on my table. "Liquidating assets, closing accounts, throwing parties. He's burning through cash like he's immortal." I rubbed my temples. He always had a taste for spectacle. It's how he hides his fear. "He's doing more than hiding it," Foster said, lowering his voice. "He's trying to prove something, that he's bigger than his mother, that he's untouchable. But the funny thing about power built on illusion," he gave me a knowing look, "is that it collapses the moment you shine a light on it." He slid another document across the table, an email printout between Edward and a man named Charles Duvall, one of Eleanor's oldest business rivals. "He's selling off company shares," Foster said, "except those shares are controlled by the trust, not him. So technically, he's committing fraud." I looked at the papers, a deep sadness settling in. "He's going to destroy himself." "Yes," Foster said softly, "and he's going to do it beautifully." On the fourth day, I decided I couldn't keep hiding in that apartment. Grief had turned to something sharper. Not vengeance, but resolve. I dressed in my old gray coat and stepped into the cold morning air. The streets were wet, but the sky was clearing, streaks of light breaking through the clouds. I walked for miles, through the park, past the river, until I found myself in front of a wrought iron gate that led to a sprawling estate. A sign read, "Northbridge Gardens, groundskeeping services hiring." I stood there for a long while, staring at the notice. It felt absurd. A man who once sat in boardrooms now looking at a gardener's job posting. But something about it felt right. Maybe Eleanor was guiding me, again, whispering that I needed to rebuild from the roots. Literally. So I walked through the gate. The supervisor, a man named Alan, was in his 50s, stocky and sunburned, with kind eyes and rough hands. He didn't recognize my name. I didn't mention who I was. "You ever done garden work before?" he asked, squinting at me. "Some," I said simply. "Enough to know how to respect what grows." He chuckled. "You talk like a poet, not a laborer. But all right, old man, let's see what you can do." And just like that, I began my new life. The first weeks were hard. My body wasn't used to the labor, the digging, pruning, hauling bags of soil under the cold spring wind. But every cut on my hands, every ache in my shoulders felt strangely purifying. There was something humbling, almost sacred about tending to living things. Watching seedlings push through dirt, knowing they didn't care who I once was, only that I cared enough to keep them alive. Alan noticed my dedication. "You're a strange one," he said one morning, handing me a thermos of coffee. "Most folks your age are retiring, not replanting their lives." I smiled faintly. "Sometimes you have to start from the soil to remember who you are." He nodded, not pressing further. Meanwhile, the world Edward thought he ruled began to tilt. He had turned our mansion into his throne. Parties every night, expensive cars in the driveway, champagne that cost more than most people's rent. Socialites, influencers, business sharks, they all orbited him like moths around a flame. But flames burn fast. Mr. Foster kept me informed, though he never gloated. "His spending's unsustainable," he said one afternoon as we sat in his office. "He's leveraged everything he can, and that's before the trust activates." "When will that happen?" I asked. He smiled. "Soon. The evidence we have from the house, his threats, his violence, that's more than enough to trigger it." But Eleanor wanted this to unfold slowly. She wanted him to see the walls close in one by one. "And the letters?" I asked. "The second one goes out tomorrow." Edward's POV came to me indirectly, through gossip, through the city's whispers. The letter had arrived that morning, hand-delivered. It was short, only a single sentence, written in Eleanor's graceful script. "True inheritance is not in wealth, but in the weight of your choices." The next day, a rumor spread that Edward had smashed a crystal decanter against the wall of his office. He had thrown his assistant out. Something inside him was unraveling. Good, I thought. Let it unravel. But still, beneath the satisfaction, I felt sorrow. He was my son, my only child. Every act of cruelty he committed still cut me like glass. I wanted him to understand. Not to suffer, not truly, but to see, to look in the mirror and recognize the monster he was becoming. Weeks passed. The spring deepened. The gardens bloomed under my hands. Roses, ivy, magnolia trees. Every morning I worked in silence while the young groundskeepers joked and played music nearby. They called me Mr. R because I never offered my full name. Sometimes I would look up and see the sun filtering through the leaves, and for the briefest moment, I would feel peace, the kind Eleanor used to bring me with a single smile. But peace never lasts long in stories like mine. One evening, I was sweeping the path near the west greenhouse when a black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. The tinted window rolled down. For a moment, my heart stopped. It was Edward. He looked different, thinner, paler, eyes bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy barking orders at the driver. When he finally looked up, our eyes met. For a few seconds, the world went silent. "Dad," he said, voice cracking slightly. "What the hell are you doing here?" I rested on my broom, heart pounding but face calm. "Working," I said simply. He blinked. "Working? As a gardener?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Have you lost your mind?" "Maybe," I said quietly. "But I sleep well at night." He stepped out of the car, fury tightening his jaw. "Do you have any idea how pathetic this looks? Do you know what people will say when they find out my father is cleaning dirt for a living?" I stared at him. "Better to clean dirt than to live in it." His eyes darkened. "You think you're clever now? You think you're better than me because you're playing poor man? Don't forget who holds the power, old man." I smiled faintly. "You hold paper. I hold peace," he sneered, stepping closer. "Peace won't pay your bills or your pride." Neither will greed, I said. Ask Mom. His expression flickered. For a second, I saw the little boy behind the arrogance. Scared, angry, lost. But it vanished as fast as it came. He turned away, muttering, "You're insane," before slamming the door and speeding off. The sound of his engine faded into the distance, leaving me alone with the scent of crushed roses and gasoline. That night, Mr. Foster called. "He saw you, didn't he?" he asked immediately. "Yes," I said, "at Northbridge." "Good," he said. "That was part of Eleanor's design. Letter 3 goes out tomorrow. This one will push him further. By the time the final letter arrives, he'll be standing on the edge of his own ruin." I sighed. "And what then, Richard? What happens when he falls?" "Then," he said gently, "you decide whether to reach down and save him or let him hit the ground." The next morning, I found myself replaying Eleanor's voice in my head. "Do not act with anger." She had written that for me, not as advice, but as a warning. Working in the garden, I realized that anger was a seed too. Small, quiet, but deadly if you kept watering it. I refused to let it grow. Instead, I focused on the soil, the rhythm of my work, the hum of life around me. Every leaf I trimmed, every flower I planted, was a prayer for forgiveness. Not just for Edward, but for myself. I had failed him somewhere along the way. Maybe by loving him too much. Maybe by shielding him too long from the lessons life eventually forces on us all. Now it was life, and Eleanor's foresight, that would teach him. By the end of that month, Edward's empire began to shake. The financial press reported irregularities in the Whitmore Corporation. Stocks plummeted overnight. An anonymous source, likely Mr. Foster, had leaked documents proving Edward had illegally transferred ownership of assets that didn't belong to him. Investors panicked. Partners fled. Lawsuits began. Edward called me once. Only once. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. His voice was hoarse, trembling between rage and despair. "You think you've won? You and that damned lawyer? You're both going to regret this. I don't care what tricks Mom left behind. I'll find a way to take it all back." I deleted the message without replying. Because the truth was simple, there was nothing left for him to take. The moment he turned his back on compassion, he had already lost everything that mattered. Weeks later, Northbridge Gardens hosted a charity event. Wealthy patrons strolled the pathways I'd helped restore, admiring the blooms. I stood quietly at the edge, my hands still dirty from pruning, watching them smile. A woman approached me, elegant, middle-aged, with kind gray eyes. "These gardens are extraordinary," she said softly. "You must be proud." I smiled. "They belong to the earth, not me. I just keep them breathing." She studied me for a moment. "You have the look of someone who's lived many lives." "Maybe just one," I said. "But it's been enough." Before she left, she handed me a white rose from the display. "For someone you miss," she said. I accepted it silently. Later that night, I placed the rose on Eleanor's grave. The moonlight shimmered on the wet petals. "I'm doing it, Elle," I whispered. "Just like you planned. He's learning, even if it's the hard way." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of jasmine, her favorite. I smiled. "I know you're still watching." As I walked back down the hill, the city lights glimmering in the distance, I realized something had changed. The grief was still there, yes, but it was no longer heavy. It had become purpose. Eleanor's revenge wasn't about punishment. It was about truth, about revealing the kind. It began quietly, as most great collapses do. At first, it was just whispers in the market, then a headline, then a storm. Whitmore Corporation under investigation for trust violations. That was the banner that appeared across every financial news outlet one cold Tuesday morning. I was in the garden, pruning the hedges, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Mr. Foster. "Turn on the television," he said, voice shaking slightly with restrained triumph. "I don't have one," I said simply, glancing around the green expanse of the Northbridge estate. "Then come to my office. It's happening." When I arrived, Foster was already pacing, phone in hand, papers spread across his desk like the aftermath of a storm. On the large monitor behind him, a news anchor was speaking over footage of Edward stepping out of a courthouse, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. Documents suggest Mr. Whitmore transferred control of family-held assets without proper authorization from the trust administrator, the anchor said. If found guilty, he could face severe financial penalties and potential criminal charges. I stood silently as Foster turned off the screen. The room hummed with tension and victory. It's done, he said, finally exhaling. The first stage of Eleanor's plan has triggered. I didn't move. What happens now? He smiled, but it wasn't a cruel smile. It was the kind of smile a man gives when he's watched a prophecy unfold exactly as written. Now, he said softly, the clause awakens. That night, we sat in his office and went through Eleanor's sealed documents again, the ones she had drafted years before her death. I remembered the way her hands had trembled when she'd told me about them, not from fear, but from the sheer gravity of foresight. The document was dated 80 years ago, written in Eleanor's unmistakable cursive. The language was elegant, almost poetic, not a legal document, but a confession wrapped in law. If ever my son, Edward Whitmore, shall act in malice against his father, Robert Whitmore, or use deceit to seize the inheritance I have prepared, the assets of the Whitmore Trust shall be immediately frozen and reallocated to a secondary holding under the protection of Robert Whitmore. This clause shall remain hidden until such betrayal occurs, at which point it shall automatically execute upon legal confirmation by my trustee, Mr. Richard Foster. Foster tapped the final page where Eleanor's signature rested beside a wax seal. This was the heart of her plan, he said. She didn't just divide her estate, she built a moral test into it. Edward's betrayal wasn't the end, it was the trigger. I stared at her handwriting for a long time, my throat tightened. She knew he'd turn on me. She suspected it, Foster said gently. Eleanor was too intelligent not to see the darkness in him, but she hoped, truly hoped, that he'd prove her wrong. I closed the folder. He didn't. No, Foster said, and now he's about to face everything he thought he'd escaped. The next week was chaos for Edward. Every news channel followed him, cameras flashing, journalists shouting. His company's board members began resigning one by one. The SEC announced a formal inquiry into his financial activities. Banks froze his accounts pending investigation. And to top it all off, his mansion, the same house he'd thrown me out of, was quietly repossessed by the trust. By Friday, he was living in a penthouse hotel, isolated and furious. I watched from a distance. Part of me pitied him. Another part, the part that had spent sleepless nights remembering his words, "You're dead to me," simply felt the world restoring its balance. Still, I never wished for his destruction. I wanted his awakening. But Eleanor had known that, for men like Edward, enlightenment could only come after ruin. On the second Friday of the investigation, Foster called me again. He's requested a meeting. I froze. With you? With both of us. I hesitated. What does he want? Answers. Maybe redemption. Maybe a target to blame. Either way, it's time. We met him at the same office where I'd first heard about the second will, Mr. Foster's law firm, high above the city. Edward arrived late wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. His once tailored suit hung loose, his tie undone, his confidence shattered but still simmering beneath the surface like a dying flame refusing to go out. "Dad?" he said flatly, nodding once. "Richard." I nodded back. "Edward." He dropped into the chair across from us and slammed a stack of papers on the desk. "What the hell is this? Every account frozen, every asset under review, the house, the company, gone. You think this is justice?" Foster folded his hands calmly. "It's not my thinking that matters, Edward. It's your mother's design." Edward's face twisted. "My mother's dead." "Her will isn't," I said quietly. He turned to me, eyes burning. "You knew, didn't you? You knew about this trap." "I didn't," I said truthfully, "but she did tell me one thing, that she trusted time to reveal who we really were." He slammed his fist on the table. "I built that empire. I earned that name." Foster leaned forward slightly. "By deception, by cruelty, and by driving out the man who raised you. Your mother foresaw that arrogance would consume you, and it has. Edward's voice cracked with fury. You both wanted this. You planned it. You've been waiting for me to fail. I shook my head. No, Edward. I was waiting for you to see. He stared at me, breathing heavily. See what? The truth, I said, softly. That wealth without integrity is a curse. That you can't inherit love through a bank account. You have to earn it through kindness. For a moment, his mask slipped. I saw the boy I'd once carried on my shoulders through the old oak grove behind our house. The boy who used to ask, will I be like you someday, Dad? But then the man returned, hardened, bitter, blind. He stood, straightening his jacket. You may think you've won, but I'll find a way to undo this. I'll find lawyers who'll tear her will apart piece by piece. Then you'll be fighting her memory, I said quietly, and memories can't be sued. He paused, lips trembling, and then stormed out. The door slammed behind him. For a long while, neither Foster nor I spoke. Finally, Foster said, He's unraveling faster than I expected. He's not done yet, I murmured, but the house of cards is. The next month unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. Edward's lawyers tried everything, appeals, injunctions, threats, but every move only revealed more of his wrongdoing. Fake accounts, misused trust funds, unauthorized transactions. When the final audit concluded, the verdict was absolute. Every asset Edward had claimed as his own was legally bound to Eleanor's trust, and by extension, to me. The inheritance had returned full circle. On the day the court's ruling became public, I went back to the old mansion, now empty, stripped of its grandeur. Dust clung to the marble floors, and the grand chandelier hung lifeless in the silence. I walked through each room slowly, tracing my hand over the furniture we once chose together. In Eleanor's study, sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, landing on a small locked drawer. I hesitated, then used the old brass key Foster had given me. Inside was an envelope addressed to me in her familiar handwriting. To Robert, when the Lion Awakens. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, yellowed slightly with time. My love, if you're reading this, it means Edward has fallen into the trap of his own making. Do not hate him. He is a reflection of the fears we once shared. The fear of being powerless. You must forgive him, even if he never asked for it. Only then will you truly be free. Remember, what we built together was not made of money or houses, but of resilience. Let him find his own, even if the road is cruel. And when he comes to you, as he will one day, meet him not with pride, but with the mercy of a father who has seen the worst and still chooses love. Eleanor. Tears blurred the page. I sat there for a long time, her words sinking into the silence like a final prayer. Eleanor was right. He did come back. It was late autumn when I heard the knock. I opened the door to find Edward standing there, not in a suit, but in a faded jacket, hair unkempt, eyes hollow. The fire in him was gone. Only ashes remained. Dad, he said softly, voice breaking, I have nowhere else to go. I didn't speak. I just stepped aside. He entered the same house he had once claimed as his empire, now stripped bare, the walls echoing with ghosts. He looked around slowly as if seeing it for the first time. I ruined everything, he whispered. Mom, you, the company, me. I set a cup of tea on the table and sat opposite him. Sometimes, I said, you have to lose everything to see what's worth keeping. He nodded, tears falling freely now. I don't deserve forgiveness. Neither did I said quietly. But your mother gave it to me anyway. He looked up, startled. You? I smiled faintly. I made mistakes too, son. I chased ambition when I should have chased moments. I thought I could protect you from the world, but I only blinded you to it. He wiped his face. What do I do now? Start again, I said, the same way I did. He gave a hollow laugh. As a gardener? I smiled. As a man who finally understands that roots matter more than crowns. That night, after he'd fallen asleep on the couch, I went outside into the garden. The air was cold, the stars sharp and clear. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not victory, not revenge, but something deeper. Closure. I could almost hear Eleanor's voice on the wind. You did well, my love. I whispered into the night, We did it, Elle. He's found his bottom. Now maybe he can climb. The next morning, Edward joined me in the garden. He didn't speak at first, just grabbed a spade and started digging beside me. The soil was damp, rich, full of life. After a while, he said quietly, "What are we planting?" I smiled. Redemption. He nodded, and for the first time since Eleanor's death, I saw something new in his eyes. Not greed, not anger, but humility. The trap had sprung, and in its wake, it hadn't just destroyed him, it had rebuilt us both. The early winter air bit at my cheeks as I stepped out of the bar onto Michigan Avenue. Snow had begun falling, fine crystalline flakes drifting lazily through the city's soft glow. Chicago looked different this time of year, almost magical, almost peaceful. But the peace I felt in the streets was nothing compared to the storm that had raged inside me for months. Edward. That name had haunted me. Not for the money, not for the betrayal, not even for the outrage he had shown the day he threw me out of our family home. No, it was for the memory of the boy who once clutched my hand in the park, who called me hero, who had trusted me completely. That boy had vanished under greed, arrogance, and cruelty. Eleanor knew it, and Eleanor had a plan, one that was finally ready to come to full fruition. I adjusted the collar of my coat and entered the gleaming glass building of Whitmore Holdings' new headquarters. The lobby was pristine, empty at this hour, the kind of silence that only wealth and meticulous security can buy. Mr. Foster met me at the elevators, his dark eyes reflecting a mixture of anticipation and exhaustion. "It's time," he said quietly, his voice measured. "Everything is in place. Edward doesn't even suspect it yet, and neither does the board or the press." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. For months, Edward had spiraled. Bank accounts frozen, investors fleeing, lawsuits mounting. Yet he had not yet realized the full extent of Eleanor's genius. Not that he deserved to. That's how she had designed it. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor. The office suites were empty, but the large conference room had been prepared for what Mr. Foster referred to simply as the reveal. Inside, I found Edward pacing. His suit was rumpled, his hair unkempt, his once arrogant demeanor replaced with brittle tension. He hadn't slept. I could see it in the dark circles under his eyes, in the trembling of his hands. He stopped abruptly when he saw me. "Dad," he said, voice thin, defensive. "What is this? I thought you were gone." "I'm here," I said softly. "I've been here all along, watching, waiting, learning, just like Mom planned." His lips twisted. "Mom planned what? You to spy on me? Help her get revenge from the grave?" I shook my head. "Not revenge, justice, truth. You see, Edward, the money, the house, the company, it was never really yours. It never could have been." He stared at me, incredulous. "What are you talking about?" "Eleanor left you what you deserved. The illusion of power," I said. "But she built safeguards, contingencies, legal instruments, moral clauses. Every act of cruelty you committed, every word you spoke against me, every threat you made, activated the clause she wrote years ago." Edward's brow furrowed, panic beginning to seep into his posture. "Clause? What clause? Stop speaking in riddles." I motioned to Mr. Foster, who stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. "Edward," he said calmly, "this is the final document. The clause is explicit. Your mother foresaw your nature perfectly. She knew what you would do, and she prepared accordingly." Edward snatched the folder and began to scan it frantically. His eyes widened as he read the words, the legalese that had been invisible to him during the will's public reading. "If Edward Whitmore shall act in malice against Robert Whitmore, the surviving spouse, or shall attempt to seize assets from the Whitmore Trust through deception, the entirety of the Whitmore corporate holdings and associated properties shall automatically revert to Robert Whitmore. This clause shall execute immediately upon verification by the trustee, Mr. Richard Foster." Edward's face went pale. His hands trembled. He looked from the document to me, to Mr. Foster, to the window as if hoping for some loophole that wasn't there. You can't do this," he stammered. "It's illegal. Mom she couldn't have." I stepped closer, my voice steady. She did. Every word of it is binding. She trusted that if you acted without compassion, without integrity, that the universe would correct itself, and it did. He sank into a chair, muttering under his breath. The fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a haunting emptiness. For the first time in years, he was powerless. You never understood, I said softly, almost whispering, that wealth is nothing if it isn't built on honor, love, and respect. Money without those things is a hollow victory, and Mom knew you needed to learn that lesson the hardest way possible. Edward buried his face in his hands. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. Then slowly he looked up. Tears glistened in his eyes, not of fear, but of realization. I don't know what to say, he whispered. I destroyed everything, including you. I walked over, placing a hand on his shoulder. You destroyed what you never understood, but you're still here. You're still my son. That's why Mom made this clause, to give you a chance, not to punish, but to teach. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he exhaled deeply, the weight of his arrogance and greed slowly lifting. I see now, he said hoarsely. I see everything. The house, the money, the company. It never belonged to me. And the pain I caused, I can't take it back. No, I said, but you can choose what comes next. Edward looked at me genuinely for the first time in years. And what do you want? He asked, voice trembling. I want you to rebuild, I said. Not just the company, not just your reputation. I want you to rebuild yourself, learn what it means to earn trust, to love without expecting reward, to carry the weight of responsibility with humility. That is the inheritance Mom truly wanted you to receive. He nodded slowly. I understand. I'll try. Good, I said, because it's your only choice now. The weeks that followed were both quiet and transformative. Edward stepped down from any executive control in the company for a while, allowing me and a trusted board, carefully curated by Eleanor years ago, to stabilize operations. I took him under my wing, teaching him not just the business, but life. How to treat people with dignity, how to value loyalty, how to recognize greed for what it is. Slowly, painfully, he began to understand. And every night as I returned to my study, I would find a letter from Eleanor waiting, gently guiding our steps. She had thought of everything, even the path to redemption. One evening, months later, Edward came to me quietly. Dad, he said, voice firm but humble, I want to apologize. To you, to Mom, to everyone I hurt, and I want to make it right. I studied him carefully. This was not the boy who had screamed at me on the day of Eleanor's funeral. This was a man, scarred, aware, and willing to change. You will, I said softly. Actions speak louder than words. Prove it, Edward, every day. He nodded, and for the first time in decades, I felt peace in the house, in the company, in the legacies Eleanor and I had built together. The final piece of Eleanor's plan came quietly. On a crisp spring morning, I called a press conference. The city's media flocked to Whitmore Holdings' headquarters. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and the world waited to see the outcome of one of the most dramatic family and corporate sagas in recent memory. I stood at the podium with Edward beside me and Mr. Foster quietly observing. I cleared my throat. Today, I began, we reveal not just the resolution of a family dispute, but the wisdom of a remarkable woman, Eleanor Whitmore, my wife, our mother. She foresaw greed, she foresaw arrogance, and she built a plan that ensured justice, not by vengeance, but by truth. She wrote a clause that protected the family's legacy and ultimately protected Edward himself from himself. The cameras clicked, the microphones recorded every word. I turned to Edward. Your mother's wisdom was profound, and now you have a chance to learn it fully. Edward swallowed, his hands clasped tightly. I understand. I will honor her trust. And yours, Dad. Thank you. I felt a warmth, a surge of love and triumph, not in wealth, but in legacy. Eleanor had orchestrated the ultimate lesson. The trap had sprung, and the lion once cornered had returned, not for revenge but for restoration. That evening, as snow blanketed the city, I walked through the Whitmore estate one last time alone. The halls echoed with silence. Memories of love, laughter, grief, and betrayal clung to the walls. I paused by the fireplace, where Eleanor and I had spent countless evenings planning our lives together. I placed my hand on the mantel and whispered, "We did it, Elle. The plan worked. Justice, mercy, and love, all in one." Outside, the wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. I smiled. She was still here, guiding us, watching. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The greatest inheritance is not money, not power, not titles. It is wisdom. It is integrity. It is the love that shapes us, even from beyond the grave. I turned toward Edward, who was quietly working in the garden with the new staff, teaching him the lessons Eleanor had built into life itself. The lion had awakened, and this time it purred with contentment. Not revenge, not bitterness, but laughter. The father's last laugh. The legacy of Eleanor Whitmore. And the future, finally, was ours.